What's going on, everybody? Greg Peters here, Miata Dad, and if you don't recognize this dyno by now, what the heck is wrong with you? We are at our one-stop shop for SoCal Miata tuning, advanced engine dynamics, and I have with me today Project Too Soon Jr., the soon-to-be nitrous NB build, and I brought my Motorsport Electronics standalone ECU. I'm going to be doing some tuning on that today, and I brought with me also, actually hold on, let me just show you what I brought with me. We got like an entire exhaust system in here, yeah, including there's a set of headers back there and a muffler, but we're not done yet. How about 2 more sets of headers? No, 4 more sets of headers, 2 different intakes. I feel like I'm going camping. Now, I don't know if I'm gonna have time to get to it, but there is a square top intake manifold in there. I feel like I brought just about everything except for the bathroom scale. Oh, wait, hold on. There it is. So basically, I'm gonna be testing a bunch of bolt-ons today. I'm gonna see what works, what doesn't, what just makes your car louder, and what actually adds power. Now, is there information online about a lot of the stuff that I'm gonna be testing today? Yes, but it's kind of like scattered everywhere, and I thought it would be cool to gather a bunch of different parts and do a real back-to-back test, same day, same dyno, same car, and see where your biggest gains are going to be. Now, we're not going to be making any monumental gains today, but I am constantly questioned by people what mods are actually worth it to do to my bone stock Miata. So I'm going to be testing some of the most popular things today, and hopefully, if I'm lucky, I'm going to walk out of here with triple-digit horsepower. I'm going to breeze over some of the stuff in the video today so it's not like excessively long. I mean, I have so many parts to change out and test, but I will have a much more detailed article. The top link in the description, you're gonna have high-res dyno sheets. Any interesting information I can find, I'm gonna put down below so you guys can make some better decisions when you're doing bolt-ons with your Miatas. Now, Too Soon Jr. here is actually a California NB1, which really is the slowest version because it's got 2 catalytic converters, including 1 in the header. Anyways, I don't want to waste any more time because it's going to take me all day to change this stuff out, and I just want to jump into it. So let's start by dynoing this thing 100% stock and see what it puts down. So on this dyno day, my goal was to use my time as efficiently as possible and spend it actually swapping out parts, doing dyno runs, and collecting data. Filming was kind of a second priority, so the video is going to jump around a little bit, but don't worry, Miata Papa's got you. I'm going to be here narrating the whole thing and trying to make sense of it all. And right here, I know you guys did just see me install the ME442 into this car, but I swapped the stock ECU back into it just so I could get 100% stock baseline. But anyways, let's get to it. All right, we're getting ready for our first run here. Drop your predictions down in the comments below. I'm shooting for 111 on this base run, and then we'll see where we can get from there. All right, so here's our 100% stock run, stock ECU, 113 wheel horsepower, 109 pound-feet of torque. And I want to mention it one more time, link in the description for the high-res versions of these dynos, as well as more dynos that I'm not even going to show in this video because I just don't want to make the video that long because I did 61 dyno pulls. I was on the dyno for 14 hours swapping out parts. Let's get that stock ECU swapped out. Next up is to throw the ME442 back in. It's got a base map on it, completely untouched except just for corrected fuel. No mods to the timing or anything else. All right, now of course I'm not going to make you sit through 61 dyno pulls, so here's our first pull on the ME442 with corrected but not perfect fueling, and it made 111 horsepower, so we're right there on the horsepower, but only 99 pound-feet of torque, almost a 10% drop in torque, specifically in the mid-range. And tuning Yoda, Toby of Advanced Engine Dynamics, looked at that graph for 2 seconds and he said, "Your VIX is off," and sure enough, I went into the tune and VIX, or Variable Intake Charging System, which is exclusive to the 99 2000 NB1 Miatas, it's a variable intake manifold system, was off. And with a standalone ECU, you have full control over when to turn that on and off. The way you figure that out is you do a run with VIX off, which I just did, and then you do a run with VIX on from idle to red line. And where those graphs cross each other is where you turn the VIX on and off to get the optimal curve. Here, check out this graph. Now, people looking at this graph right here are saying, we're splitting hairs here. What are we looking at? 2 horsepower? But remember that these same principles are gonna apply as the car gets more and more horsepower. So if we make it to 150 horsepower with bolt-ons, or say 200 plus horsepower on nitrous, or whatever direction I take this car in, these same principles are going to gain even more power. So I hope you got your pen and paper ready. So here's the overlay of VIX 100% on versus 100% off. And right here around 3,500 RPM is where VIX on totally takes off. So this is going to be our crossover point, or our switching point for VIX. We're going to turn it on right here, and we have a peak gain of almost 8 foot-pounds of torque at the wheels. And if you look down below, the fuel has not been corrected for that gain in airflow, and it goes pretty lean right here. So once we fix that, we're going to gain even more power. Now if you check it out up top above 6,000 RPM, the horsepower really starts to fall off fast. And even though the peak only has a difference of 2 horsepower, if you bring the slider all the way up near redline, it's a 10 wheel horsepower difference. So it is very important to get the crossover points right, and those crossover points might change as the engine is modified. So we'll have to figure that out later. The next thing I was interested in is to see if Mazda left any power on the table with the stock ECU. And that is kind of an unfair way to put it, because the NB can run on 87 octane and I'm tuning on 91 octane, but I'm still interested to see if there's power to be had. So look at these curves right here. This is just gradually getting that AFR dialed in, seeing if the motor likes 12.3 to 1 or 12.8 to 1, and adjusting the ignition map that comes with the base tune, which I'm sure is pretty conservative. But after some adjustments and a few dyno runs, look where we landed. That's a 7 wheel horsepower gain over stock. That's 6%. Just with the tune, we cracked the 120 wheel horsepower barrier, and I think it's time to get into some bolt-ons.
120. 120. Coming for you.
Next up, we have Battle of the Intakes. So here we have the stock intake versus the Auto EXE carbon intake, which is this short little 90 degree that goes behind the headlight, and the ever popular Racing Beat intake, which uses the stock crossover tube and just replaces the airbox with this turnaround and a cone filter. So before we check out the results, here's a slightly better sounding dyno pull, and if you listen closely and you have good speakers or headphones, you can hear the VIX crossover point. I'll put an indicator on screen right when it happens. And the results are in. So we have the stock intake in red with 120 wheel, the Racing Beat intake in blue with 123.3, and the Auto EXE actually made the most power at 124.3. You can see here in the mid-range, for some reason, the Racing Beat at 4,000 made an extra 4 foot-pounds of torque. It's got some weirdness going on, and the reason I want to point this out is there's actually a lot to intakes on Miatas. I've done some research on how to build the optimal intake system for the Miata, and we're actually going to get into it a little bit later in this video, but more so in the next dyno session. So since the Racing Beat is actually my intake and the Auto EXE was just borrowed, I'm going to leave the Racing Beat on, and we'll continue on with 123 horsepower. All right, so the easy stuff is basically done, and it's time to start getting into the headers. I don't know why I thought this was a good idea, me hot swapping headers multiple times on the dyno in the same day. I tried, I gave it my all. I didn't get through every single set of headers that I brought, but I believe I hit all of the important data points. That was after I figured out some, we'll call them, issues. I regret everything, every decision for today. All the exhaust bolts rusted in, of course. Why did I think I was gonna change 5 headers in one day? Just gotta keep pushing on, see how far I get. So what I've got here is a selection of exhaust manifolds, and the first one I want to test out is an OEM Plus mod. This is a set of headers basically from a stock NB2. So I'll be not only deleting the cat, not only shaving weight from the cast iron manifold, but this is also actually a header design, and it's supposed to lead to some horsepower. Now I got this set used from Treasure Coast Miata, and just take a look at how nice and beautiful that heat shield and all the hardware is. So if you guys are looking for used NB2 headers after this video, Treasure Coast is the place to get them. So let's throw these things on and give them a test. That was the hardest 3 horsepower I have ever worked for. All joking aside though, we did gain almost 3.5 horsepower at the wheels for pretty much no downsides, cheap cost, and it looks stock, and it's actually smog legal if you relocate the downstream O2 sensor behind the second cat. So for the next test, I really wanted to put on just the catback exhaust to see if there's any power at all to be had from this loud, obnoxious exhaust. This is an ISR catless exhaust, but I was running into a serious time crunch and I wanted to make sure I finished the day out strong. So what I did here is just install the catback exhaust with the first set of aftermarket headers. So whatever gains we see here, I don't know, we'll just have to split them in half between the headers and the exhaust. Anyways, let's get this first loud run done with and see where we're at. So the gains you're looking at here are replacing the stock exhaust with a catless 2.5-inch exhaust and going to an upgraded set of headers, which I believe are Maxim Raceworks headers. They don't have the plaque on them, but I think that's what they are. More importantly, these are tri-Y headers or 4-2-1 headers. That'll be important in just a minute. But you're looking at 6 horsepower at the wheels approximately between the combination of those two parts. So I don't know, let's call it 3 and 3. So for all the noise that exhaust makes, you're looking at about 3 horsepower at the wheels. And keep in mind that this is actually tuned. I am correcting the fueling along the way to make sure that each mod is actually making the peak horsepower that it can. And I'm sure that this catless exhaust would be more beneficial if this car was making more horsepower. So always keep that in mind. Everything is a percentage. So if this car was 300 horsepower, maybe that exhaust would make an extra 10 or 20 even. The next test is actually more interesting than I thought it was going to be. I'm going to be battling the Maxim Works headers against the Racing Beat headers. And the key difference here, they both have about the same size runners and the same size exit, but the Maxim Works uses a tri-Y or a 4-2-1, and the Racing Beat uses a 4-to-1 design, which supposedly is better for peak horsepower, but, you know, the internet lies, right? Let's swap these things out and see what they do. Now in the mid-range, as expected, from about 3100 to about 3800 RPM, there is a bump in torque with a peak gain of about 7 foot-pounds of torque. And then up at the very, very, very high RPM, you're looking at about a 1 wheel horsepower gain on the 4-to-1 headers. Now, the Racing Beat headers are the ones that I actually bought for the car. So those are the ones I'm sticking with, 132.8 horsepower at the wheels. But we're not done yet. We got a couple more things to try. So being a little dissatisfied with only a 1 wheel horsepower gain, I decided that now would be a good time to do a little additional fueling and ignition advance refinement, and I was able to get the car up to 136.1 wheel horsepower. The overlay you're looking at here is how much power it made on the tri-Y headers versus the Racing Beat headers with the additional fueling and ignition refinement. So still a little bit of a disadvantage between 3200 and 3700, but up on top, the car is really starting to scream a little bit more. And I was pretty much done at this point, but Toby said, hey, I got this intake that we throw on cars sometimes and they make more power. Why don't we try it on yours? And I was like, oh, okay, I'm sure it's not going to make any additional power. Well, first of all, look at this intake and look at what the car was able to make with this silly intake on it. And yes, you are reading that correctly. That is 140, almost 141 horsepower, okay? 4.5 horsepower just from swapping from an aftermarket intake to another aftermarket intake. So after this, it opened my eyes a little bit on intake systems for Miatas, and I went home and I did a bunch of research, and this is not new information. It's all available online, how to build the best intake for your Miata. So I bought some parts to do some testing, and the Miata is definitely getting a new intake after I saw the potential. Bigger difference than almost any other mod we've done today from that. We're over here doing like 50 pulls to gain 2 horsepower at a time. It's Miata ownership at the core. I mean, come on. You need your 2 horsepower. So the last chart I want to leave you guys with is the final pull for the car's current configuration, which is 136 horsepower, overlaid with the first pull of the day, which was completely stock. And look at the gains. This is just headers, exhaust, intake, and a tune. 113 up to 136 wheel horsepower, 23 wheel horsepower gain. Look at that big end. And when I first hopped on the freeway in the car, I was like, it doesn't really feel much faster. I think it's just louder. But when I kind of, spaced out for a while, was just driving home late at night, and I went to pass a car and I downshifted, I was like, holy crap, this thing is actually faster. And that's where I'm going to end today's video. I hope you guys learned something new about doing bolt-ons. The car is quicker, but we're not done yet. I already have dyno day number 2 scheduled. I have 4 more common bolt-ons that I'll be testing and tuning. My optimistic goal is to leave the dyno with 155 horsepower. Will I be able to do it? You're gonna have to stick around for the next one to find out. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button if you are new, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.